Welcome everybody. We're so excited. As the African proverb says, when the roots are deep, there is no reason to fear the wind. And after
Hmm.
powerful days of Black student success, I'm beyond excited for today's session and to continue uplifting, empowering, and strengthening us together, right? I am also just nervous because there's so many amazing speakers today. Carl, what do you think about that? I'm excited.
I'm excited. It's been such a great week and it's been such an honor to be a part of something so important to our students nationwide. Thanks to the leadership of the brothers and sisters here in California, starting with Dr. Keith Curry. Also honored to be part of the new school with you, Dr. Huffman, and this community service to really kind of guide our elders along from the OGs and kind of help them, as they try to help us. Such a blessing to be a service to others. I do want to compliment Dr. Young, and her hat game has been on point, and we draw inspiration from folks, and so I had to get my Prince
Oh.
Hakeem on. You know what I mean? And step my game up. I heard some ball hate out there, so I'm getting a 2-for-1. But our students are really buzzing about this. The community is really talking about all this great work, and I'm excited to see what we have to fill us all up today as we lift up and level up together.
Yeah, what better way to kick us off though with the new school? So we're representing our African attire. I hope you all are doing the same thing. But we also have to pay tribute to our ancestors and those who stepped foot before us. So furthermore, we have our OGs coming up. OGs, we hand it off to you.
Thank you, Dr. Pilar Huffman. And we appreciate you, Carl Kemp. The OGs are in the house, and we want to do some quick shout outs. We want to give some special thank yous and appreciations to the music. Can you all throw those slides up for me? Thank you. Music credits to our one and only Dr. Terrence Elliott. Thank you so much. The next thing we want to do is thank our sponsors. You've seen these sponsors all week. RP Group, the Keenan folks, Miracosta, Long Beach. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then the giveaways. Really quickly, we want to acknowledge these folks who are part of our giveaways for Wednesday. Herb, give some love and some shout outs to those folks who won some stuff on Wednesday. We love y'all. Keep watching. Watch parties. Get in here. Herb, it's all yours. What we got next?
Thank you, Dr. Young. And if you're joining us from one of the many watch parties happening across the state, please scan the QR code and fill out the watch party attendance form. Black Student Success Week events and resources. We have a one-stop shop resource that all the info to connect with us online and register for the remaining events this week. Please scan the QR code to keep that resource handy. We'll also drop links in the chat throughout the webinar. Blackout Advocacy Day. Today is Blackout Advocacy Day, where we take on the virtual state capitol to advocate and discuss our policy priorities. Act now. Scan the code or grab the link from the chat to send a pre-drafted letter to a local legislator requesting their support of this year's Black Student Success Week policy platform. Now, let's go over the agenda for today. We will have opening remarks from Mr. Ronnie Hands, Dean of Student Engagement and Completion from Southwestern College. And we have our Chancellor's Office very own, Dr. Abdi Malik Bull, Visiting Executive of Institutional Equity, Innovation, and Strategic Impact. We have an Amend All African Diaspora Education Summit video, and then we have keynote remarks by none other than Dr. Edward Bush. Then we will have faculty presentations from Dr. Tanika Bird and Dr. Jonathan Henderson. And then we'll close it out with the one and only Dr. Ricky Shabazz, president of San Diego City College. Without further ado, I pass it off to Ronnie Hands and Dr. Abdi Malik Bull.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are at. Appreciate you, President English, my good brother, Mr. Herb. Appreciate you, my dear sister, Dr. Helen Young, Dr. Pilar Huffman, Brother Carl Kemp. It's amazing to have all these phenomenal people. Before I even start, man, I have to acknowledge Dr. Keith Curry and Dr. Edward Bush. This was a conversation about 6, 7 years ago at the Black Policy Summit. And I recall living in San Diego, presenting in Oakland, and Dr. Keith Curry having to head out to Compton to pass out pizzas. And this idea of having Black Student Success Day at the moment, having advocacies, having folks come to the Capitol in buses, and this thing called COVID happened, the longest game of cooties that we played back in 2020, and ended up having Black Student Success Week, flipped the script, and I'm so glad that we just went from that moment to a movement. And before I introduce Brother Ronnie Hands, I just want us to have a moment to understand why we chose this topic. We are an African people. And in understanding that, it's not just in our attire, but it's also in our genetic and DNA makeup. And this particular moment that we're in, we have to be cognizant of the fact that a lot of folks here, particularly those that survived the vicious legacy of white supremacy and white inferiority complex, their ancestors survived much, much more difficult times than this, through Jim Crow, through slavery. And so going back to the motherland and tapping into your roots is essential, because your DNA has those survival genetics in there. That you are the survival of the fittest, that you come from that essence, that you come from a genetics and DNA that survived that. And so ain't no DEIA ban gonna restrict you from moving forward. And that also our history is more than resistance. It's about persistence. It's not just about revolution, it's about evolution. Oftentimes we talk about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali and Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman. But our history, when we tap back into it, it's about excellence, not just from the continent that emanated all over the diaspora. We talk about the richest man in the world, Mansa Musa. We talk about Sunni Ali Bear. We talk about Shanghai and Mali, kingdoms and dynasties in Africa. So when we talk about lifting up and leveling up, we're lifting up and leveling up our pedagogical practices. We're lifting up and leveling up our African DNA and ancestry. We come from greatness. And so oftentimes we get relegated to the revolutionary folks, but we don't talk about Marie Brown. We don't talk about Lewis Latimer. We don't talk about Dr. Shirley Jackson. We don't talk about Gladys West. Everyone that uses a GPS right now, there's a Black woman who invented that GPS technology who's alive. Ain't no Uber Eats or a Lyft or Postmates without that technology. And so let's celebrate those folks that are contributing to our society right now, but let's also understand to tap back into our intelligence and our greatness. And so I want us to think beyond resistance. I want us to think about persistence. I want us to think about beyond revolution. I want us to focus on evolution. And I want us to think, once we tap into our roots, then our fruits are going to be solid. So we got to be African from the roots to the fruits. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my dear brother, Ronnie Hands, and I will let y'all know from the Chancellor's office, systemically and systematically and institutionally, we are behind Black excellence. No matter what the times are, no matter what the flavor of the week is, no matter what weather is out there or storms or conditions, we are committed to Black excellence. I'm going to turn it over to my good brother, another Aries, good-looking brother, brother Ronnie Hands. I'm going to let you take it over, brother. Go ahead.
So no one told me that Dr. Bull was going to come with that fire. We're not going to step on that. We're going to let that live. I think I want to thank Dr. Keith Curry for finally putting me on camera. Thank you, brother. I think he was funny by showing the contrast between the bald man and the S curl, but we're going to work with that today. I am very, very enthusiastic about being here today because I get to be here amongst practitioners who don't talk about it. They are about it. And that's what I love being around. I'm enthusiastic about hearing some of these speakers here today. It is always a pleasure to hear and be enlightened by these good folks. And I can see some in the chat, and yes, I am from Inglewood. My wife, shout out to my wife, Ashante Hands, the dopest president in California. Yeah, I'm biased, but she gets it done. But we're going to shoot it right back to Dr. Bull, who's going to introduce our first video. Take it away, Dr. Bull.
Yes. So as we said earlier, this journey has been documented. And many of you, shout out to all y'all as well, who committed to going to the motherland in the past few years. We want to showcase this video of their experiences. Those who have not gone, stop planning on going to Cancun and Thailand. You need to pull up to the motherland. All right, that's the real land.
That part.
So with that being said, we're going to show you this little FOMO video. And go ahead. Cue it up, please. Thank you.
Our students are dying. Their hopes, their dreams, and aspirations. They come in wanting to do something and they leave, oftentimes not seen in our institutions. So there's urgency. If we're going to center the experience of our Black students, we have to come back to the source.
Slavery was horrible, but taking our names away from us literally disconnected us from our homeland, our family lineage, and who we really are as a people. The naming ceremony gives us a piece of ourselves back, and it lets us know where we started from and that we can always come back to that.
Your name tells you your destiny, your community, and your clan. And so the reason why we have a naming ceremony is to understand that the names that we have that were inherited and passed down to us have a lot of richness.
When Black people were enslaved, it wasn't no people called a slave. It was farmers, it was doctors, it was priests, it was medicine men and medicine women, it was architects and engineers. So we have to understand the brilliance that existed in our people before enslavement.
When you come here to Cape Coast and you come to these slave dungeons, you're coming really to the scene of a crime. You being able to read about or watch movies about something that's different than actually being at the scene of the crime and being able to assess the entire environment for yourself.
Leadership is organizing and mobilizing people and resources to meet needs and solve problems, and that's what ADES is all about.
Our students can go through entire P through 20 experience and not see their history, their culture, and their traditions centered within the curriculum. How does that affect your self-concept? How does that impact what you believe is possible in your own life?
Are we educating our young people to get jobs? Are we educating them to be liberated Africans? Our argument is that our best bet is to educate them for full agency and sovereignty, and that's what this experience is about.
What I want is educators to open their minds and come to Africa so they can better support African American students.
Again, leadership is organizing and mobilizing people and resources to meet needs and solve problems. We can tell about an institution's commitment based on what their budget says. There needs to be annual funding to help support these African-centered education initiatives. These things should be instituted so that there can be support for faculty and students and support staff every year to engage in these activities.
When you love our students and our students feel that genuine connection, there's no subject that they cannot master, there's no system that they cannot navigate. But we have to transform our colleges, and it's my hope that this plays a big role in transforming our institution.
Always enjoy seeing that video. I have the first, I'll be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Dr. Aisha Lowe, who has been just instrumental in putting this whole webinar together. Thank you, Aisha. You're dope. So we appreciate you. I have the pleasure introducing the next speaker. If you went to the first pilgrimage to Ghana, you will know what I'm talking about when I say this. He is here. Impactful brother that I learn something every time he speaks, and you're in for a treat today. Without further ado, Dr. Edward Bush, president of Casumas Rivers College. Take it away, Dr. Bush.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm going to move through this quickly. I want you all to do something. I'm going to say the word freedom, and I want you to put in the chat and the first words, no more than three, of what comes to mind as you attempt to define what freedom is or what it feels like. If you're in a chat party, tell your moderator to call out what comes to mind so they could type it into the chat. What comes to mind when we say freedom? Yeah, and as that going, give you like 30 more seconds. I'm gonna take you through another exercise really quick. Get those words out. Get those words out. I want you to close your eyes with me. Close your eyes. I need y'all to really do this. If you're in a watch party, look at your neighbor and see if their eyes is closed. Yeah, y'all catch that joke in a few minutes. Look at your neighbor and make sure their eyes is closed, but close your eyes. And I want you to imagine a couple of things with me. First, I want you to imagine, how would Black food taste if we were never given only the scraps to cook? Just imagine, what do you think Black food here in America would taste like if we weren't ever just given the scraps to be able to formulate our diet? Now I want you to think about, what would Black music sound like if it wasn't produced out of the pain and suffering that we had to go through here in America? What would our music actually sound like if it wasn't produced or constrained by the pain that we've had to endure, the lynchings, the killings, the water hoses? What would our art and movies look like if we didn't have to fight so hard to find ways to express ourselves and to be seen? What will we sculpt? What will we draw? What will we create? Then finally, I want you to really think on this. Students, faculty, our staff, and administrators, what will our bodies and our mind feel like, even in this moment, as our eyes are closed on this particular Thursday in April? What would our mind and body feel like if it didn't have to be in response to the trauma of racism and the daily microaggressions that we face? If we didn't have to struggle just to be acknowledged and to be seen, if we didn't always have to assert our right to be here, how would our mind and our bodies feel in this particular moment? And before you open your eyes again, I want you to imagine, what would our food taste like? What would our music sound like? What would our art and movies look like? What would our minds and body feel like if it was absent of that? Now you could come back with me and open your eyes. And we talk about, and what I have found, we have talked about all the time, a world in which we are free. And it's very difficult for us to operationalize and imagine us truly being free because so much of our lives and our identity has been built around oppression. And it's been in response to racism that we don't even know what it will feel like or what our culture is if we were not oppressed. And so we fight so hard for this idea of freedom, liberation, and sovereignty, but we really don't have a strong concept of what freedom, liberation, and sovereignty actually looks like, feels like, sound like, or tastes like, or smell like. So it's easy for us to remain oppressed and constrained because if you don't have a sense of who you are free, then you really don't have a sense of yourself at all. So the reason why it's important for Black folks to go to the continent of Africa, the reason why going to the All African Diaspora Educational Summit is so critical because it gives you a glimpse. It gives you a little sense. It gives you some space and opportunity to imagine yourself free. It gives you space to think beyond the constraints of racism. It allows you to live for a moment outside of the gaze of whiteness. To be able to dream and to reflect and to exist and to just be. So to me, freedom is to have the opportunity to just be. Be who you are, to be what it is that you was called to do, to exist in your divinity, absent of constraints. And so you can't get in tune to who you are when you living under someone's definition of who you are, and you always responding to the definition that they have given you. And no matter how hard we try to fight against it, we find ourselves still constrained because we always have to fight against something. And what I'm trying to get us to believe and what I want us to know is that you don't always have to fight against something, that you need opportunities just to be absent of the fight. So you got to go back. You got to go forward to Africa. And that's physically going to the continent, but it's digging into the Africa that is inside of you, that people work so hard to silence. So it's imperative that you go to the continent. It's imperative that you come to ADS because we create a space and a place for you to be. So you can produce and create and make music and make movies and create food that is produced out of the essence of who you are and out of your spirit and not through someone else's identity or how they look at you and expect you to be. With that, I'll turn it over to our great panel that's coming up. You have the information about the summit, September 24th, 2026. Be there. It is going to be the place to be, literally and figuratively.
Thank you, Dr. Bush. When I told you you had a treat, did I lie? Did I lie? Notice he's bald too. Malik, you might want to invest. I am, when I think back on when I was in high school or going into this college campus, if I had that message in my head when I stepped into those classrooms, or if I step into a meeting with leadership or other practitioners, I will know that I belonged every time. I want to bottle up that message. This is why it was so important for me to go, to Ghana and experience this, experience what Dr. Bush is talking about. We are entitled to be us. And that message encompassed that. Now, I have another treat for you. We have two speakers coming up. I want to introduce Dr. Tanika Bird. She's a Communication Studies Faculty and Professional Development Coordinator for Casumas River College. And our own here at Southwestern College, Dr. Jonathan Henderson, Professional Development Faculty Coordinator at Southwestern College. I hand it off to you, Dr. Tanika Bird. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting us. We are excited to be here. Jonathan and I have a conversation that we're gonna get into about our experiences as educators, as faculty, and also both of us are professional development coordinators. But before we get started with kind of the nuts and bolts of things, what we both wanted to do is kind of share with you the why as to why it was that we decided to go to the summit. I have had the pleasure of attending the summit both in 2022 and 2024. Initially, my why is because I am an educator. I love education, and also I love to travel. So when I heard that Amin was putting together a summit where both things are going to be merged, I was like, that's where I'm going to go, right? And I have traveled. Dr. Bull said, stop playing, stop going to, Mexico and all these other places, go to the continent. I guess I was playing, right? Jonathan, I was playing. I've traveled throughout Europe. I've traveled to Asia, Central America, but through all of my travels, as much as I learned about other cultures and I learned about myself, there was always something missing, right? There's always something missing in there. And I didn't know what was missing, but I had a feeling that what was missing was on the continent. And so I am also a true believer in experiential learning, right? And that you can read as much as you want, it's here. But you have to be able to also experience some of these things, right? And so there is a book called Transformative Learning in Practice, Insights from Community, Workplace, and Higher Ed. And what Taylor Merzorow said in 2009, that book was published. He said, whenever a person encounters a disruptive event, and I believe that traveling can be a disruptive event for the good, right? And he says, it triggers a transformational learning process and creates a new reference point, which causes folks to reflect on our beliefs, our norms, values, ideas, and experiences. And through this reflection process, then we can have pivotal experiences and we can think about ourselves and others in society differently. I'm sorry. The trip to Ghana was a completely transformational experience for me. I didn't know what I was going to experience when I was there. And let me just share this one thing before I turn over to you, Jonathan, for your why. When I first touched down in Accra and got off the plane, I was feeling some way. I was full of emotion because I had done something that my ancestors thought that would never could occur. I returned back to the continent. And if some of you who've traveled internationally know, you have to go through customs, right? And so I'm standing there in the line of customs and you have to give them your passport. So I'm standing in front of the beautiful passport agent and she looks at me and my eyes are teary because I know that I'm about to walk through these gates and be in Africa, in Ghana, right? She looks at me and she says, don't cry. Welcome home, sister. Tears. That just initial welcome to Ghana for someone who grew up here as a descendant of enslaved folks, that meant something, that my brothers and sisters that had been removed from for so long are welcoming back home. That touched off all the experiences I had in 2022 and 2024. I wanted to share that as my why. My why has changed, but really the central piece is I was looking for that piece of the puzzle and I found it in Ghana. This ADES conference, the summit really helped me feel that piece. And I know that I'm supposed to be there. And because I now feel that I'm whole and I know where to get more information, I can now share that with my students, with my colleagues, with my community. Jonathan, what about you? And what's your why? Yeah.
That was great. And mine was very, very similar. I had personal reasons and professional reasons. And so personally, as you just said, Dr. Bird, charting my ancestral return to West Africa, to Ghana, was literally like a pilgrimage. It was something that my soul and spirit had to do.
Right.
Ever since I first stepped foot in that my first Africana studies course, I had to go back. I've got to figure this out. But I was broke. So I have been saving for a long time, trying to figure out how to get back there. And then everyone I talked to before, for literally the last 10 years, who have been to Africa, shared that their experience was transformational. And they couldn't even really describe what the experiences were. They were just saying it was transformational. And I saw that in the way that they practiced at their institutions and in their spaces. And so imagine my excitement when a man unveiled that we were going to have an experience and that my institution was going to take care of the cost. Oh my gosh, I'm there.
Right?
And I got to bring my wife as well. Shout out to Dr. Crystal Henderson. And then professionally, I wanted to put my theory into practice in a real way. And I'm an Africana Studies professor as well. And so I've been teaching these concepts for a long time. And I have been infusing these philosophies into the way that I practice as a professional development faculty coordinator. But I wanted to know, what am I missing? What can I glean from the experiences that I'm having, informed by sort of this African-centered philosophy? And so that's a little bit about what we're going to take you all through as well. And so we've talked about that a lot. African-centered philosophy, African-centered philosophy. But what is African-centered philosophy? We're going to show a slide on the screen so that you can see a little bit about what it is. And so in its simplest form, African-centered philosophy is three things. Number one, it is the quality of thought and practice rooted in the cultural image and interests of African people. Dr. Bush alluded to it a little bit earlier. That word, culture, when you think of culture, think of by default, right? So it's our interest by default, our image by default. When you're driving down the street, right, and you're looking at the signs, the signs are going to be in English by default because it's in the image and interest of native English speakers. In the same way, this is what we think about when we think about African-centered thought. African-centeredness is places the life experiences, histories, and traditions of African people at the center of analysis, as subjects of their own experiences rather than objects on the margins of others.
Dr. Henderson, can you say that part one more time? Say that part one more time.
Yes, as subjects of their own experiences rather than objects on the margins of others. And so when I think about it, I use the example of third person versus first person. So as shown on the pictures to the right, third person is you looking at the game, right? And so the game is actually being seen, the perspectives, the interest. It's all from the perspective of the viewer, not the perspective of the person in the game. Right. So the interest and interpretations are of the viewer. They're essentially objectifying the player. But the first person, you are in the game. You're feeling, right, the pressure. You're thinking about what you're going to do next based on your perspective. That is subject versus object, right? And then finally, right, African-centeredness is a foundation for African people for understanding, authenticating, and transforming their own realities. And this underscores why adopting African-centered philosophy is crucial to institutions that say that they want to be and or are Black serving, because the goals and outcomes should be rooted in the cultural image of Black people and should center Black communities as subjects. And so, for example, if at your college, your ultimate goal is supporting Black students is to close equity gaps, you must ask yourself the question, is that an African-centered solution? Because, for example, moving from a 26% completion rate to a 35% completion rate if that's the goal, then we've lost 65% of Black students. And our African scholars would argue that part of African-centered culture is collectivism, survival of the group. Right. So our end goal within that context should be 100% completion. Well, Dr. Henderson, that's impossible. But that's according to your philosophy. But African-centered philosophy says that it is possible. So how do we develop these strategies? Where do we go to search for those answers? You can't get it from a book. And that's why this experience was so important. We had to learn about this, right, through experiential learning, which I believe is one of the biggest purposes of our trip to Ghana. And so given that, and I know I said a lot, I'm interested, Dr. Bird, in your experience on African soil and how that impacted your practices.
Thank you so much. Yeah, when we were just hearing from Dr. Bush, and he said that the summit was able to give us space and opportunity to imagine ourselves as free. It wasn't enough time, right? Probably myself and many folks could have stayed and we heard, much, much longer. There was a weight that was lifted while we were there, and we were able to dream and to be differently in that space.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you agree that other folks, this is not just you and I saying this, right? We saw the video, but I really would challenge, I think everyone who went felt that it was just a different space to be.
Yes. Yes.
For me, specifically, what the summit did was opened up spaces. I did not major in Africana studies. And so I needed to do a lot of this work on my own. We were able to hear from leading scholars like Dr. Chike Akua, Dr. Anthony Browder. I also did my own research with Dr. Naeem Akbar, and I revisited work like through Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde and W.D. Du Bois. And then that was able then to really help me understand. And my key takeaway is this: education and knowledge acquisition is the root and the key and the tool for identity restoration. And what I mean by that is to restore our positive and stable identity as our cultural selves, right? Living here in the US as part of the African diaspora, and even sometimes folks who are on the continent, we have an alien identity that is imposed on us, right? And some of us don't even know that it's imposed on us.
Don't even know.
Right? Don't even know. And this alien identity is skillfully, it's crafted and manipulated by our oppressors to purposely suppress our excellence, right? And so I have been able, because of this summit, is to read more about that. I currently teach in the Umoja program. I teach a dedicated public speaking class. Shout out to my students who are watching right now. I also teach a dedicated Puente class. I am able to use what I have learned about identity restoration in both classes, because we as marginalized folks in this country understand what it means to have our identity taken, having that theft. And so the benefit of having an African-centered focus in this theory is that then I am able to challenge my students to solve problems, to think differently, to do assignments, focus on us, solving our problems, our needs, our interests, and our concerns. How it has also shifted is that I understand in my bones, my job as an educator, it is a spiritual service position. And it is not just about, like you were just saying, Dr. Henderson, about the numbers and like how many, are we moving percentages? It's about souls and lives, and the way that that young lady made me feel when I gave her my passport and said, "Welcome home, sister."
Yeah.
If I can be just that little piece for my students when they walk into the classroom and say, "Welcome home into this classroom on this campus," or you might not necessarily feel welcome all the time, but for sure you feel welcome here. That's one of the biggest impacts that it's had on me as a faculty member. What about you?
Yeah. I think the same thing. I think I found, my impact in the nuance. And so for me, I'm my educational philosophy is rooted in a concept called Nsaka Sunsun. NSAKA SUN SUM. It's an Akan word that stands for touching the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so in Umoja, there's also a concept called the ethic of love. When you move with an ethic of love, you touch your students' spirits. That's where that kind of comes from, right? And that's from Nobles and Adeleke. For the scholars in the room, 2011, right?
Love it.
And so for me, you know, going on that trip, I saw components of that throughout the entire trip. Shout out to Elder Jerry Scott. I have to say that too.
Yes.
And her team, the experiences that they created for us were literally second to none.
Right.
And so when thinking about that, for example, I'll just give two examples, right? One of the first tenet of the Encyclical Summit is operating from the belief that students are capable of anything and everything. That's great to say in theory, but then when I went to the continent and I walked through the dungeons barefoot and experienced the heat of the day while walking through into those spaces. And it wasn't even summer, mind you.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
Literally burning the soles of my feet. I'm imagining the resilience and resistance of our people as they did that, going into and down into the catacomb, seeing the scratches on the wall, seeing 400 years worth of feces and blood on the floor.
That's still there.
Fossilized, right?
Yes.
Still there. And I come back and I'm thinking my students can't complete their homework assignments. No, it's not. That's not the way, right? And so, you know, that's one. I think another example that I really liked was number two. That it comes from the philosophy number two, which is education is a process where learning is directly connected to the students.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that in the food that we actually ate,
Right.
because while eating the food, I don't know about you, but my stomach started to get a little upset.
It tasted good though.
Right, it was fire.
It sure did, right?
But I had to take some pills because, you know, the bacterial makeup of the food didn't match my digestive makeup.
Right.
And so me realizing that even my gut has been culturally dominated by the West, such that I can't even experience the food that I'm supposed to be calling home. And so now bringing that experiential knowledge back once again to my students in the classroom, to my communities, to begin to break this down and talk about the nuances of control and how we've been controlled and what we can do to get out of that control. Those were the things and many, many others that I experienced really in the nuances of those conversations. But once again, none of, I think, our experiences and what we took from the spaces and places mattered unless we're actually practicing this stuff, unless we're implementing it in various ways. So I'm interested, Dr. Bird, you know, how have you began to implement on this trip and the experiences from this trip into your practice?
Right, you're absolutely right. This last trip, yeah, as you can see there on the slide, that was the crew, most of us that came for Cosumnes River College. Shout out to you all. We created a plan, right? And that was something that the summit was really intentional about, making sure that there was time for us to dream and believe as a unit, so that when we came back, that we knew we had a strategy, right? So at our campus, our strategy, our plan is called Healing the Wounds of Colonial Education. Now, we could talk about an hour about all of this. So I'm just briefly going to go through. And if there's anyone who's interested in learning more about our plan and how we're implementing it, please reach out. But our plan was broken up into 4 areas, and each area was designated by an Adinkra symbol. So what we did is we decided in the areas of the student life cycle, practitioner professional development, experiential learning, and instructional environment, how can we center the African experience and make sure that we are focusing on African student success and also the success of our African faculty, staff, and administrators? It's really important that it's a holistic process. So I'm actually going to move from this slide to the next one because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time if folks have questions. At CRC, Cosumnes River College, this is what our plan looked like. As I had mentioned earlier, I'm also the professional development coordinator on campus, as well as an instructional faculty member. So we made sure that when we came back that we did flex presentations to the entire campus, so they knew the powerful experiences that we went through while we were on the continent. We also made sure that for my professional development hat, that we had, before we went the second time, right, that there was an intentional selection process. We wanted this to be a systematic and systems way of making sure folks are attending this conference and understood the assignment, right? And so we made sure we had classified faculty and administrators. Our chancellor participated, as well as Pam Haynes, who is part of our board of governors and also a trustee at the time. And these were just some of the ways from my professional development hat that we made sure that we continue the process, because this is really a 10-year process. What the summit is a 10-year process for the fellows. Really quickly, in the classroom, I have updated my philosophy of education I share with my students every single semester to incorporate all the learning that I have done from the summit specifically, and then after with my readings and also community projects, right? Not only am I able to challenge my students by assigning assignments that are African-centered, right, and that are also focused on identity restoration, which I had mentioned earlier, but then also when we have classroom discussions, or you know what, I just move differently because I've attended the summit. And so I believe that it's almost like when you're on the airplane, right, and they say, put your mask on first before you help others. Because I've been to the summit, I am able to do my work as a professional development coordinator and in the classroom because I have had my mask on, and now I can support others to help them get their masks. Now, what's happening on your campus?
Yeah, I'll go through mine really quickly as well. One of the first things that we did was that we wanted to really impact our community at Southwestern College, and so we decided to start what's called a Black Education Community Collaborative, and it's a collaborative between ourselves at Southwestern College and our Black community in South San Diego, with the goal of fostering the conditions to ensure a thriving and successful Black community. And so what we realized was that we were doing a lot of things in terms of Black community work and progress in the South Bay, but we were doing them in silos. The K through 12 was doing their own thing. Southwestern College was doing their own thing. So we decided to come together. First thing we did was ask the community what they needed. And so we engaged in a month of listening sessions with community members, with students. And then the findings from those listening sessions were used to inform our collaborative's mission, vision, organizational structure, and physical structure. And right now we're in the process of building that out in community, and then also trying to figure out, okay, now based on these findings, what are we actually going to do? How are we going to actually impact the community so that all of our students and family members and communities are successful? And then the second thing that we did on the next slide is that we started our first iteration of our Black Community Allied Training. This is a training for employees. Shout out to Dr. Wendy Stewart and Professor Shantae Mitchum at MiraCosta College for actually being the founders of this training. So Southwestern College purchased the training from them, and then we're in the process of implementing this training and training employees around how to be how to serve as community members and advocates for Black communities. One of the things that I took back from the trip was that, it's not just about students, it's about the Black community. And one of the things that was missing was modules around how to support the work of Black employees. So I added a module into the training for Southwestern College that does just that, helps folks think about and understand how to support Black employees, especially Black employees who are supporting Black students on campus.
Wow, a lot of really great work happening at your campus. I know that we're kind of getting down to the end of our time. So what we want to do very quickly is there's a last slide that shows what our recommendations, putting our professional development hats on for folks who are out there who are inspired and want to attend the summit in 2026. As you can see here, we have some recommendations for the pre-summit, things that y'all can do, and then also post-summit. If I had to pick one of those things I think is really important, it would be to have an intentional selection process so folks understand the assignment. And then on the back end, as far as afterwards, just making sure that there are regular meetings with the folks who attended. What about you, Dr. Henderson?
Yeah, I think, supplemental PD for participants is 1000% crucial. And so, especially for Black and non-Black attendees.
Right.
So for example, if you're non-Black, your pre-work might look like charting your own ancestral history and finding out your own ancestral history's relationship to colonization and enslavement in West Africa. Then what does that mean? And then what is your responsibility for supporting students? If you're, maybe from the Latinx community or from the API community, what is your historical and cultural experience with colonization? How is that married to the cultural experience of African people? And then what can you do to support Black students? If you're Chinese, there's a lot of kind of current issues happening in Africa as a whole, but West Africa right now when it comes to kind of China's infiltration into Africa.
Right.
And so what does it mean to actually learn more and understand that? Then what is your responsibility to take that back to conversations that you're having with students and supporting Black community? So I think there's a lot of pre-work that can be done. And then there's also more pre-work for Africans. I want to just kind of pause here because we're at time, but there should be a lot of pre-work that's done as well. Yeah. All right.
All right.
And that's what we have.
I think that was
Q&A, right?
Thank you so much
time.
for allowing us to chat.
Yes,
That was absolutely powerful. You two are powerhouses. And I just want to acknowledge not just your care for our community, but your care for delivering the information in a way that just makes such sense. So thank you very much, you both. Thank you, Ronnie Hands. Thank you, Abdullah Bo, for all of the love and support that you guys have given us today. We are super excited to introduce our closing speaker, y'all. It is a man who doesn't need great introduction, but I'm gonna give it to him anyway. Dr. Ricky Shabazz, president of San Diego City College. It is all yours, brother.
Yes, Dr. Young, thank you. It is my honor and privilege. Before I even get into this, folks, in the chat, let's show some love for Dr. Bird and Dr. Henderson. Black excellence in real life. Let's give some love, show some hearts, show some love. They really set the stage for the why. Dr. Bush set the stage for the why. I want every single person, as you think about ADES 2026, to have that same experience that Dr. Bird talked about, getting off that airplane and hearing one of your brothers and sisters that are on the continent say, welcome home. You want to talk about putting chills on your spine, having the hair on your neck stand up when you go to the continent and have somebody say, welcome home. Why do we do Black Student Success Week? Why do we do Black Student Success Week? I got that question, why? You heard why throughout the presentations. Dr. Bull talked about why. He talked about some fruit too. You heard Dr. Bush talk about why. You heard Dr. Bird and Dr. Henderson talk about why. Why do we do Black Student Success Week? Let me tap into my inner Dr. Bush. We do it because we should. We do it because we can. We do it because it is our legacy. And as we talk about legacy as descendants in the hopes and dreams of an enslaved person, your big mama didn't have a chance to go to the continent. Many of our ancestors didn't have a chance to go back home. You owe it not only for yourself, but for your ancestors to go back to where this started. And I'm going to challenge our understanding of Africa. First of all, Africa is dope. Somebody in the chat, please put Africa is dope. You deserve to go see how dope Africa is. Now, let me give you an example. There's a history in Africa that exists before slavery. Now, you hear this notion, we come from kings and we come from queens. But let me say, when you go to West Africa, when you go to East Africa, when you go to North Africa, when you go to South Africa, you get a chance to debunk this notion of Tarzan and some of the just myths that people have of Africa. Africa is dope. Somebody, come on, show me some love. Say Africa is dope. It is also modernized. You saw some of the video of the flyovers of the modernization. Folks, the first colleges and universities, they didn't start in Europe. They didn't start in America. They started right there in Africa. Well, let me prove my point. I had a chance. My wife wanted to go to Europe. She wanted to go to Italy. And I'm sitting in Rome and I'm looking at the architecture. And I'm like, you know what? I've seen that before. And I turned to my wife. I said, look, that's the same architecture that I saw when I was in Egypt when men took students to Egypt. And my wife didn't believe me. Now, don't nobody tell her that I said that. She looked at me. And so as we continued on our tour of Italy, we wound up in the Vatican, and I saw the same architecture that I saw in Egypt. And eventually the tour guide said, yes, all of these pillars, we got them from Egypt and they want them back. And so you should go to Africa because you want to reclaim your history. You want to see the examples of the modernization, science, the first doctors. And so you are called to join us in ADES 2026. If we could put the slide up there, folks, so that you can see ADES 2026. You already heard people in the chat say that they're registered. I am taking 20 people myself to ADES. So what does that mean for you? There are only 400 slots, folks. 100 of them are already claimed. And so you need to hurry back to your colleges and advocate for your college to take you, sponsor you, support you in being able to go to this conference. If you've got to go into your own pockets, registration is open now. Yes, over a year away, right? End of September. Yes, that says 2026, folks, but it is going to fill up. Let me promise you, it's going to fill up this spring. You don't want to miss this opportunity to get off of this plane with over 400 other educators from not only California community colleges, but from across the country. And get your welcome home, brothers and sisters. The history of Africa is beautiful. It is modern. It is an oasis. It is an opportunity to be around Black folks, Black police officers, and not feel threatened by them. To be able to see your ancestral homeland with your own eyes. The most powerful thing that I've done in my career is take one of our facilities professionals, a 67-year-old Black woman, as we returned from Africa the first time. She had all of these questions about what it was like to go to Ghana. And I said, you should just go. And she turned to me and said, I'll never be able to afford you to be able to go. And as Dr. Bird said, we took classified professionals, we took administrators, we took faculty, we even took students. And we made it possible for this 67-year-old Black woman who had never thought that she would ever return to her ancestral homeland to be able to go to Africa. And there's so many things I could say about this, but I'm just going to end with the video. If this video does not encourage you to go to the Amend website, click on conferences, and wind up on this slide where we are right now to register for ADES 2026, there's nothing else I can say to motivate you. Let's roll the video, y'all.
No woman, no cry.
I am a 60-something-year-old woman who is finally realizing that one of her dreams is coming true.
Hey, little darling, don't
I'm so excited to be able to see something that I have always been inside me, but I had yet to experience. The journey to the village enhanced my understanding of a culture that I'd always read about, something that I had always seen. As I approached the king, he told me, "You look like your name."
You can't forget your past, so dry your tears, I say.
I cried for the slaves that were held 150 to 200 packed in small, tight rooms with no air. Of the women's whose very bodies was taken from them, the dungeons, to feel them, to feel the walls, to see the blood stains. Personally, the walk of the last bath for me was a return home. As I walked, I remember picking up a pebble and holding it in my hand. I walked with my mother's picture. We gonna be all right. understanding of the African education system is remarkable. The way that they put education first. I've gained a new lease on life. I want to thank the Chancellor, the San Diego Community College District, for honoring me with this homecoming. It meant the world to me. It was an experience that I didn't know I would ever receive, and I'm grateful and thankful. Thank